Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Give Me God of War walkthrough, and we're now to speak to Sindri post one of the tougher fights in the game. And we're going to be climbing, is it Thalamur? I keep forgetting how they spell his name, but it's that big dude there who I'm throwing my axe at his nose, the big giant, who's going to make a little bit of a cameo later on, so look forward to that. But the important thing in this video too, guys, is I'm going to forget to do a puzzle that gets you an incredibly powerful runic attack. It is a runic attack that is so strong, it can completely circumvent having to fight things. So you might want this one, because I'm going to miss it, and seemingly I can't get it, even though the various internet sources say that you can buy them from the blacksmiths, but I've not been able to. And the move itself is a buff for the axe. Kratos buffs the blade, and when you swing, you have, depending on how upgraded it is, you have a certain amount of seconds where your axe is buffed. And the axe does additional damage, it fires a projectile when you swing, and it also causes stun. So when used correctly, you can use this against bosses, against enemies, against almost anything in the game, and you will stun them, and they cannot get out of it, they cannot break it, they cannot beat it. The only alternative, and the only exception, sorry, is this enemy right now, Travelers. So, when people mention Souls influences in this game, this is the biggest one in my opinion. This is an enemy who is incredibly shielded with very slow attacks, very high damaging attacks, lots of big, meticulous swings, lots of armor, lots of life. He is about as Soulsian as it gets, and every so often in this fight there's going to be the... are they called Revenant? No, Revenant's the other one. Is it Remnants? I can't remember. Reavers. I think they might be Reavers or Wiccans. I don't know the names, guys. I'm sorry. I need to really look at the bestiary to know it perfectly. But he could be a Reaver. He could be a Wiccan. He's a projectile-throwing douchebag, and you want to use the boy to stun him and then finish him with the axe. And they put them in here just to kind of add a layer of texture to this fight to make it more demanding, but they really shouldn't, because this is one of the first times you're bumping into this character, and he's not an easy enemy. In the grand scheme of things, he's an easy enemy, but when it comes to actually doing what is needed of you, he's quite tricky. And something happened just then that was really important. Whenever he pulls his skull out and he starts doing, you know, Hamlet, you want to throw your axe at it. It will stop it, neutralise it, and stun him a little bit. It's really, really powerful, really, really useful. But you might have noticed that this enemy has a huge shield on his back, and he loves to go into this kind of backwards stance as he moves towards you. He does that because he doesn't take damage from behind. If you attack him now, even if you hit his leg, you'll hit his shield and it will count as no damage. This is his triple or quad slash, depending on which version of these enemies you're fighting. He's also lost his armor now, so he's going to be much more flinching. But just be careful because they hurt. This is an enemy that really, really hurts. They're deceptively fast. They have both horizontal and vertical swings. They've got good tracking. They can be very, very difficult, so... learn to fight them, understand it, and this is where the puzzle is. I'm going to run past it now. In that room, pull the block out, hit the wooden thing with your axe to turn it towards the side, climb up both of them, jump across, and that's where the axe buff will be. And trust me guys, get it. It's really, really good. It's the kind of win button that anybody can use and good players can embarrass things with. So it's super, super useful. I cannot stress enough just my remorse at missing that move. And it's dumb because I got it on my first playthrough, and there's no excuse for me not to get it, but circumstances just led to me forgetting to grab it. And it's... I paid for it dearly, but at the same time, I did learn a few things by not having it. It made me mix up my strategies, learn how to do things slightly differently. And that's kind of the moral of this game, isn't it? It's not like the old God of Wars in many ways, so you do have to mix it up and do things differently and learn how to play it. And I do think that there is some quality here. I do think there's some fun to be had, and there's a lot of good mechanics that you can enjoy. I just think as you get to the higher end of things, as you get to the more advanced parts of it, is where it kind of starts to show those first tentative steps of not quite having it down yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. Most first games do. And I think if people look at it as the first game in this new series, I think they would probably be less critical of what they've done. But it's hard to do that when it's Kratos and when it's God of War and when it's this franchise that's been around since... When was God of War 1? 2004? Something like that? 2005? It was a long time ago. That's crazy, right? That's a long time. There are people who weren't born then who are now playing this, you know? And it is different, vastly different. And speaking of different, this is a puzzle that I'm going to be skipping over that leads to a very difficult sequence. So, in true Cory Barlog fashion, we have a sequence where we have to essentially kill enemies and make sure something stays alive. Now, if you played God of War 2, you will be reminded a little bit, perhaps, of the translators, which, good idea, absolutely horrendous to play on higher difficulties in challenge runs, because they're just fucking miserable, right? They're never fun. Never. Protecting something is never fun. It's just how the games work. Whoever makes it fun to protect something, good for you, sir. You're a genius. But at the moment, we're not there. And here, you have a time limit until this platform breaks. So you have to get these dudes off it as quickly as possible. And it starts off really manageable and really fun. And I wish it would have stayed that way, personally. I like the idea that it puts you against standard Draugrs that can all be knocked about, because they're fun enemies, and it turns this into a puzzle rather than a gauntlet. And this first phase, you're going to see me parrying, kicking, shield bashing, knocking, running, attacking, and look how fun that was. Knocking people away, chucking them and stuff. Here's the second wave, do a quick executioner's cleave, throw the axe a little bit, the boy's shooting his arrows, quite a few enemies here. The one thing I'm concerned about is the guy with the shield, because it'll make him difficult to knock him off. But hopefully we'll trip him up and we'll figure it out. Somebody's leveling up, but that shouldn't stop him from falling, right? Yeah, look at that. Even leveled up, the running heavy attack knocks people back. So, we're on the final phase here of this first sequence. A couple of Draugrs turning up. A little bit of time left on the clock there. There is a bit of a grace period once it completely empties, but that's the end of the first fight. How cool was that, right? That was a fun, kind of strategic little ensemble. Now we come to the second one. It's an extension of the previous one, but it's a little bit more demanding, because it's got this big fella. And this big fella highlights everything that's wrong with the systems in this game, in my opinion. Because there is no good way to knock him off. It doesn't exist, and if it does, I can't find it at the moment, and I need to work on that. I've hit this dude with everything, and the only way to realistically bounce him is if the kid trips him, and you just happen to be doing a launcher near him. Or Rage of the Spartans is the second one. And I would like to not use Rage of the Spartans, right? That's kind of how I work. I'm trying to do my best to get rid. And just then was a great example. Did you notice how the boy was on top of the dude? Whenever the boy climbs on top of the Draugrs, he gives them properties they don't normally have. So knocking them off is viable. But unfortunately, he jumped off that time, and I think the Tyr's Revenge is what helped it before. But there should be a way to even the score. Some skill-dependent mechanic that enables good players to treat this guy like a scrub. And it doesn't exist. That's the thing that this game is missing, in my opinion. It's missing higher-level techniques that enable all playing fields to be even, if you're good enough. And that's not to be confused with just doing something and being good, because you can do that. A good player can do anything, but can a good player use good systems to be better? That's what I'd like. And this wave right now is the wave I'm going to be using Rage on, because you fight a lot of the nightmares. Here are a bunch of the leveled up Draugrs, and then they're going to throw a Revenant at you while there are still nightmares firing at you, and the time limit was getting a little bit scary, so I just use Rage to knock them off. But a little word to the wise, I don't think you want to do the heavy attack in Rage, because I think it breaks the platform. It might not, but on my first playthrough, that's kind of what it looked like it did. So be very careful with Rage. I'm going to use the R1 attacks. Feel free to throw boulders if you've bought that or something along those lines. But right now, when she turns up and there's that nightmare still knocking about, nah, that's about the point where I say, fuck this, and I get rid of everything. Which is going to make this fight really, really difficult on the next run I do, because I'm not going to be able to use Rage. So that'll be interesting. But you see the time limit, you see the nightmares, you see the Draugrs. I feel like they could have maybe paced this part a little bit better. Is it difficult? Yes. But it's only difficult because I'm trying to do it clean. You know, I'm trying to do it without getting tagged. It's very well checkpointed. Each of those individual encounters where you get experience at the end is a checkpoint. So if I were to have died then and wanting to do that better, I would have only had to fight that big group of Draugrs, those nightmares, when that Revenant turns up and more nightmares, and I would have been okay. But the moment she turns up, it makes everything awkward. And it's going to all be about hitting her with the bow, freezing her and knocking her off. If you can do that, you'll be fine. If you can't, it's going to be a reset, because she can be chucking projectiles at you from off screen, the nightmares are going to be detonating into you, all of this is going to be happening all at the same time. It's going to be a hell of a lot of micromanaging to get that cleaner. But that end part as well, make sure you run towards the wall and grab that thing quickly. If you don't, you'll die. The checkpoint is before you killed those two Viken enemies next to those red jewels, so it's not too punishing, but still it's kind of funny that it lets you die. And the game is inconsistent with that. There are moments like that where if you don't do something, fail state. But then, when you get grabbed by that B-boss in Alfheim, if you don't tap the button, he will infinitely grab you and never kill you. He'll just keep on choking you forever, and it looks really homoerotic and weird, like he's trying to give you a full Nelson. But Kratos never dies, never takes damage, the animation never ends, it's just one big unending love kiss. It's very bizarre. But we've now dropped down onto this area, moving towards the Chisel. Moving towards, in my opinion, the hardest boss in the game. Just because of a bad choice, basically. I know a lot of people will be like, oh, but Sigrun is way worse and all this kind of things. Sigrun is difficult, but you don't have to kill her at the same time as killing somebody else. And if you fuck it up, they don't both heal, do they? And that's the problem with Magni and Modai. It is a boss fight that is 100% about managing your life bars, and one mistake costs you everything. And it is exceptionally difficult for reasons which I would say are shitty. But here's the dining hall. This is actually a really tricky room, because there's 3 fights you can engage in here. 2 of them are optional, I believe. You don't have to... Oh no, maybe... Maybe they're not optional. I guess we'll find out. I don't know if you can control the swing here. Maybe you can. I always do all of them because I like fighting in this game. It tends to make you better at the game if you partake in its combat right. That's my logic anyhow. But the premise is pretty simple. You're going to use this chandelier. Oh no, you do choose. Awesome. Right. So when you pick up the dew here, the explosive dew, you can choose which one of these walls you break. The one on the right is an ogre, the one in the middle is a troll, and the one on the left is a pack of wolvers. And ironically enough, the wolvers are the worst one. You wouldn't think so. This one's kind of dodgy because not only does he have nightmares and he throws rocks, which you have to be careful of because the rock dodging is quite tight, but I think... Is it the troll? Yeah, it's the troll then. So the ogre's not too bad, ignore what I just said, guys. It's the troll. The troll summons wolves, or has buddies who just turn up, fashionably late. And wolves are not necessarily the most difficult enemy in the game, but when you're fighting something else, they're a problem. Much like that move just then, where he swings his arm. It doesn't give it unblockable properties, but there's times when I've tried to block that move and it's hit me. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that. There is an easy way of fighting ogres though, so you never have to see that move. All you do is you hug them, attack them, and parry them. Do that repeatedly, there's nothing the ogres can do. Even this one, he will get into the same loop of pushing you back and trying to slam you. Push, slam, push, slam, push, slam, dead. Fit his new braces with your axe, and then proceed to open up the next doorway. And that point over there, if you're wondering, is another one of those chisel doors that enables you to possibly go into Odin's vault and take on another bound Valkyrie. But this is going to be a frost troll, and we've seen one of these before. Is it the same guy? No, it's another guy. Technically this should be its own video, this should be a boss video, but I haven't separated it because it's kind of like just an enemy. And once again, that's my criticism of the trolls, is just the fact that fundamentally they're a really boring enemy. It's the same problem this game has with a lot of its design. Baldur has like 3 moves, and he's the final boss with the same 3 moves. The trolls turn up all the time. There's dozens of them in this game, and they've got the same 3 moves. Like, this is an entire game founded on bosses who have 3 moves. And don't get me wrong, in God of War, the original games, the bosses didn't have the most diverse movesets. They didn't. But why? The reason why it was more interesting, I think, is because you were wailing on a part of a body to get to a prompt that did something fun. So the bosses weren't necessarily about, you know, the most ridiculous and technical stuff. They were about getting to those awesome bits where you slam people's faces in a door. And in this game, you don't slam people's faces in doors. So you notice that all you're doing is wailing on an enemy that doesn't have many moves. And that's when it kind of falls apart. And especially when people are toting the Souls inspiration. Because Souls games, even if you don't like them, even if you think they're easy, and even if you think that their design should not influence action games, which is I'm 100% part of that party, you have to admit, especially a game like Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne, they have some of the most unique and iterative movesets of a lot of contemporary bosses. There are not many bosses that have as many animations and as many moves as bosses in those games do. And it's just a product of the time and the technology, right? That was really dangerous just then. When those, like stalagmite things, or stalactites, I don't know the difference, when they explode, they can give you a nice bit of an AoE, and it can be very difficult to dodge. And you want to get good at that, because there's a double boss coming up at the end of the game that implements that particular type of attack. And it also does that weird computer, we know exactly where you're going type of omniscient AI, because he'll put those little ice mines where you're going, not necessarily where you were or where you're moving away from, so they'll block you off with it, and it's really, really cheeky. But here is the Boar Stampede. This is one of my favourite of the runic attacks for the boy, but for the purposes of the walkthrough I wanted to use a different one, and that's the reason why I'm using the crows. Both of them are fantastic though. And then here we are, the real boss. So this is a pack of Wolvers, and believe me when I say, you want to be as aggressive and as dominant in this fight as you can be. You do not want these enemies leveling up. If they become elites, this gets really dangerous. If they start powering up their arms and turning into crazy tyrant monsters, this gets really scary. So just be as aggressive, as evasive, and as deadly as you can, because it's going to pay dividends if you can stop this early. These enemies are so interesting. I'm kind of baffled by how little they are in the game. But there's a part of me that's super grateful because, you know, much like enemies like the Cerberus Breeders, or like the Satyrs, or even like the Centaurs, even though they're kind of easy, you know, they're enemies that you don't fight too much, so when they turn up, you're not as good at them. And that's one of the things with the Wolvers. Unless you've been doing something like Nilfheim, and spending a lot of time with the random fights, or even doing Muspelheim, where there's a specific trial where you fight them, you're not coming across these enemies that much. And when you do, you're reminded of just how deadly they can be. And I can't stress enough, guys, of the importance of experience with a game. It seems trite at this moment to tell you that the more time you spend playing, the better and more comfortable you'll be, but it's so true with enemies. Enemies that used to scare you and used to intimidate you, if you spend enough hours fighting them and understanding them, it'll get to the point where you don't even notice them anymore. You don't even notice that they were a threat, because you understand exactly what they're doing at all times, every move that's coming your way, everything you have to do to avoid it. And when you get to that kind of comfortability, the video game transcends what it is for a lot of people, and you start playing it on a much higher level. And that higher level is less about, you know, oh, this is a really pretty looking game, or this is a really cool cinematic, and it's more about frames and recovery and all these crazy terms that, you know, people speak about on forums in these niche communities. And if you can get to that point, good for you, dude, because it's a good place to be, being that competent at anything. But keep on moving forward. There's going to be some mild platforming coming up, and in the spirit of this walkthrough, I will be trimming it out and jumping across it. Because let's face it, guys, you're going to spend so much time climbing in this game and mantling and things of that nature that you don't really want to watch me do it, right? As a motorcycle makes itself heard, and you're probably going to hear that really badly because it's really hot right now. We're having some kind of crazy heat wave. The planet's having probably the same thing, but I'm not used to it being 24 degrees in England, because 24 degrees is about, you know, 17 degrees higher than I like it. So I'm having an awful time right now. It's fucking miserable, and it all goes back to Hicks, man. I think people who enjoy this kind of weather are lizards.